Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. I straightened my tie, checking my reflection in the hallway mirror. The house was quiet, Katie still asleep upstairs. Perfect. I wanted to surprise her with breakfast in bed for our anniversary. As I headed to the kitchen, my phone buzzed. It was Daryl. Hey, Franklin. Happy anniversary, man. Got any big plans? I chuckled, cradling the phone between my ear and shoulder as I cracked eggs into a bowl. Thanks, buddy. Nothing too crazy. Making Katie breakfast right now, then I've got dinner reservations at Chez Pierre later. Fancy. She'll love that. Listen, we still on for golf this weekend? Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it. I paused, lowering my voice. Hey, think you could cover for me at the office for an hour or so this afternoon? I want to run out and pick up Katie's gift. Say no more, I've got you covered. What did you get her? I grinned. Diamond necklace. Been saving up for months. Damn, Franklin. Making the rest of us look bad. Daryl laughed. All right, I'll see you at the office. Have a good one, Romeo. I hung up, feeling a warmth in my chest. Daryl was a good friend. Always had my back. I finished up breakfast, Katie's favorite, Eggs Benedict with smoked salmon, and arranged it on a tray with fresh coffee and a pink rose from our garden. As I climbed the stairs, I heard Katie's voice drifting from our bedroom. She must be on the phone. I paused outside the door, not wanting to interrupt. I know, Rachel. It's just, I don't know. Franklin's great, but sometimes I feel like something's missing, you know? I froze, my grip tightening on the breakfast tray. Rachel's tinny voice came through the speaker. Girl, you need some excitement in your life. When was the last time you did something spontaneous? Had a little fun? Katie sighed. It's not that simple. Franklin's a good man. He takes care of me. But does he make you feel alive? Come on, let's go out this weekend. Hit up that new club downtown. Who knows, you might meet someone interesting. There was a long pause. Maybe you're right. I'll think about it. I took a deep breath, plastered on a smile, and knocked on the door. Morning, sweetheart. Happy anniversary. Katie's eyes widened as I entered. She quickly ended her call. Franklin, oh my God, you didn't have to do all this. I set the tray down and leaned in to kiss her. She returned it, but I couldn't help noticing how she pulled away just a fraction too soon. Of course I did. It's our day, isn't it? I perched on the edge of the bed. So, any fun plans with Rachel this weekend? Katie's smile faltered for just a moment. Oh, you know, just some girl time. Nothing exciting. I nodded, my jaw clenching slightly. Well, don't let me keep you from your breakfast. I've got to head to the office, but I'll see you tonight for dinner, okay? I've got a surprise planned. Can't wait, Katie said, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. As I drove to work, my mind raced. Was I reading too much into things? Katie and I had been happy, hadn't we? Sure, maybe things had gotten a bit routine lately, but that was normal after 5 years of marriage, wasn't it? I shook my head, forcing myself to focus on the road. I was being paranoid. Tonight would be perfect. I'd give Katie the necklace, we'd have a romantic dinner, and everything would be fine. It had to be. The day dragged on, each minute feeling like an hour. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the nagging doubts in the back of my mind. Finally, it was time to pick up Katie's gift. As I walked into the jewelry store, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Is this Franklin Cervantes? Yes, this is he. Who's calling? Mr. Cervantes, this is Nurse Gracely from Mercy Hospital. I'm afraid there's been an incident involving your wife. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the counter for support, my knuckles turning white. What kind of incident? Is she all right? The nurse's voice was sympathetic, but her words hit me like a physical blow. Your wife was brought in unconscious and unclothed. She was found on someone's bed. It appears things got out of hand during an intimate encounter. I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. I'll be right there. I don't remember leaving the store. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. The next thing I knew, I was standing at the reception desk, demanding to see my wife. Nurse Lee approached, her face etched with concern. Mr. Cervantes? I'm Grace. We spoke on the phone. Why don't you come with me? I can explain the situation further. I followed her in a daze, barely registering my surroundings. She led me to a quiet corner and gestured for me to sit. Your wife is stable, she began, but I'm afraid the situation is delicate. She was involved in an extreme intimate act that went wrong. She's physically okay, but understandably very shaken and embarrassed. Who was she with? I managed to choke out. Grace hesitated. I'm not at liberty to disclose that information, but the other party is here as well. They brought her in. My fists clenched. I want to see her. Now. Grace nodded, leading me down a sterile hallway. As we approached a room, I heard voices. One was Katie's. The other was male, unfamiliar. I burst through the door, my vision tunneling as I took in the scene. Katie, pale and small on the hospital bed, and next to her, a man I'd never seen before. Tall, well-built, with an arrogant smirk that made my blood boil. Who the hell are you? I snarled. The man stood, his smirk widening. Name's Sammy. Sammy Whalen. Your wife's friend. I lunged at him, my fist connecting with his jaw before I even realized what I was doing. We crashed to the floor, grappling and throwing punches. I barely registered Katie's screams or the shouts of hospital security as they pulled us apart. Franklin, stop! Katie cried. This isn't his fault. I whirled on her, my chest heaving. Not his fault? Then whose fault is it, Katie? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been fucking someone behind my back. Katie's eyes flashed with anger. Maybe if you paid attention to me once in a while, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere. Do you have any idea how lonely I've been? I staggered back as if she'd slapped me. Lonely? I have done everything for you, Katie. Everything. I work my ass off to give you the life you want. I planned a surprise dinner for our anniversary today. I was about to buy you a diamond necklace when I got the call that my wife was found naked in another man's bed. Sammy chuckled, wiping blood from his split lip. Sounds like someone's not satisfying the lady. Can't blame her for wanting a real man. I lunged for him again, but security held me back. Get him out of here. I roared. Get him out before I kill him. As they dragged Sammy away, I turned back to Katie. She was crying now, but I felt no urge to comfort her. All I felt was a cold, hard rage. We're done, I said. I want you out of the house by the time I get home. And Katie? I'm going to make you regret this. Both of you. I swear to God, you'll wish you'd never met me. I stormed out of the room, ignoring Katie's pleas. In the hallway, I nearly collided with Grace. Mr. Cervantes, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do? I paused, an idea forming. Actually, yes. I need the name of a good private investigator. I have a feeling there's a lot more to this story than I know. Grace hesitated, then nodded. I might know someone. Her name is Claire Black. She's discreet and thorough. I committed the name to memory, already planning my next move. Thank you, Grace. For everything. I noticed something in her eyes. It was a liking towards me, but I brushed it off. As I left the hospital, I felt something shift inside me. The Franklin who walked in the loving husband, the trusting fool was gone. In his place was someone new. Someone who would stop at nothing to uncover the truth and make those who betrayed him pay. Let them think they'd won. Let them think they'd gotten away with it. They had no idea what was coming. The drive home was a blur. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts, none of them pleasant. How long had this been going on? How many times had Katie lied to my face? And who the hell was this Sammy character? I pulled into our driveway, my driveway now. I supposed, and sat there for a long moment, staring at the house we'd made our home. It looked the same as always. Neat lawn, cheerful flower boxes, warm light spilling from the windows. But it felt different now. Tainted. Taking a deep breath, I got out of the car and walked to the front door. I half expected to find Katie inside, ready with excuses and tears. But the house was empty, eerily quiet. She'd taken me at my word, then. Good. I made my way to the kitchen, yanking open a cabinet and pulling out a bottle of whiskey. As I poured myself a generous glass, my eyes fell on the refrigerator. There, held up by a magnet, was a photo of Katie and me from our last vacation. We were on a beach, sun-kissed and smiling, my arms around her waist. With a growl, I ripped the photo down and tore it in half. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Cervantes, this is Claire Black. Nurse Lee contacted me about your situation. If you'd like to meet, I'm available tomorrow morning. Let me know a time and place. I typed back quickly, 8 a.m. Sunrise Diner on 5th Street. Setting my phone down, I took a long swallow of whiskey, relishing the burn. Then I headed to my bedroom, and started packing up Katie's things. With each item I tossed into a box, my anger grew. The silk nightgown I'd bought her for Christmas. The perfume she wore on date nights. The framed photo of us on our wedding day. As I yanked open her bedside drawer, something caught my eye. A small, leather-bound notebook I'd never seen before. Frowning, I picked it up and flipped it open. What I saw made my blood run cold. Dates, names, details of encounters that made me want to vomit. It wasn't just Sammy. There were others. Many others. I sank onto the bed, my hands shaking as I read entry after damning entry. Glenn, Norman, Dan, Kelvin, and more. So many more. My phone buzzed again. Katie, Franklin, please. We need to talk. What happened today? It's not what you think. I can explain everything. I stared at the message, then at the notebook in my hand. A cold, cruel laugh escaped me. Oh, I'm sure she could explain. I'm sure she had a whole web of lies ready to spin, but I wasn't interested in her explanations. Not anymore. I texted Claire back. Change of plans. Can you meet tonight? It's urgent. Her reply came quickly. I'll be there in an hour. Text me your address. I spent the next hour compiling everything I could find. The notebook, bank statements showing mysterious withdrawals, hotel receipts. Katie hadn't just betrayed me. She made a fool of me, and I was done being a fool. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 p.m. I opened it to find a trim, professional-looking woman in her early 40s. She extended her hand. Mr. Cervantes? I'm Claire Black. I shook her hand, ushering her inside. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Can I get you a drink? Claire shook her head. I'm on the clock, Mr. Cervantes. Let's get down to business. What can you tell me about your situation? For the next hour, I laid it all out for her. The hospital call, Sammy, the notebook. With each revelation, Claire's expression grew grimmer. This is extensive, she said finally. Your wife has been very busy. I laughed bitterly. That's one way to put it. What I need to know is how deep this goes. Are there more men I don't know about? And there are hints here about some kind of business dealings. I need to know everything. Claire nodded, her eyes sharp. I can do that. But Mr. Cervantes, I have to ask, what's your endgame here? Are you looking for grounds for divorce? Or something more substantial? I met her gaze, my voice cold and steady. I want them ruined. All of them. Katie, Sammy, every last one of these bastards who thought they could play me for a fool. I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. I want them to lose everything. Claire was quiet for a moment, studying me. Then she nodded. All right. I'll need a retainer to start, and I'll keep you updated on my progress. I thought about Katie's face in the hospital, full of false remorse. I thought about Sammy's smug grin. I thought about all the nights I'd worked late, thinking I was building a future for us, while Katie was out destroying everything we had. I said, let's burn it all down. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night poring over Katie's notebook, each entry feeling like a fresh betrayal. As I made my way downstairs, my phone buzzed. It was Daryl. Hey man, you coming in today? Katie called the office looking for you. Said it was urgent. I gritted my teeth. Of course she had. Thanks for the heads up. I'm taking a personal day. If she calls again, tell her. Tell her I'll be in touch when I'm ready. There was a pause on the other end. Franklin, is everything okay? You don't sound like yourself. It's not, I said flatly, but it will be. I'll fill you in later, all right? After hanging up, I made myself a strong cup of coffee and tried to plan my next move. Claire had promised to start her investigation immediately, but it would take time to uncover everything. In the meantime, I needed to confront Katie. I needed answers. Just as I was about to call her, my phone rang. It was the hospital. Mr. Cervantes? This is Dr. Patel. I'm calling about your wife. She's requesting to be discharged, but given the unusual circumstances of her admission, we wanted to check with you first. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. Is she medically cleared to leave? Yes, but... Then let her go. I'll be there shortly to discuss things. I arrived at the hospital 20 minutes later to get my answers, my stomach in knots. As I approached Katie's room, I heard voices. One was hers. The other, to my fury, was Sammy's. I burst through the door, my eyes locking onto Sammy. He was perched on the edge of Katie's bed, looking far too comfortable. Well, he drawled, standing up. Look who decided to show up. Come to take the little woman home? I ignored him, focusing on Katie. She looked small and pale in the hospital gown, her eyes red from crying. Franklin, she began, her voice trembling. Please, just let me explain. Now you want to explain, huh? I cut her off, my voice icy. Explain how you've been fucking half the town behind my back? Explain how you ended up naked and unconscious in this piece of shit's bed? Sammy stepped forward, his face twisting into a sneer. Watch your mouth, buddy. Katie's a grown woman. She can do whatever she wants, with whoever she wants. I turned to him, my fists clenching at my sides. You stay out of this. This is between me and my wife. Ex-wife, Katie interjected, her voice small but defiant. Franklin, I want a divorce. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to let them see me flinch. Instead, I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that made both of them recoil. A divorce? That's rich, Katie. You think you can just walk away from this? After everything you've done? Katie's eyes filled with tears. I never meant to hurt you, Franklin. It happened. I felt trapped, suffocated. Sammy made me feel alive again. Sammy puffed up his chest, wrapping an arm around Katie's shoulders. That's right, sweetheart. You don't need this loser anymore. We can be together now, out in the open. I looked between them, disgust and rage warring inside me. You two deserve each other. A cheating whore and her pathetic boy toy. Sammy lunged at me, but I was ready. I sidestepped his clumsy attack, grabbing his arm and using his momentum to slam him into the wall. He crumpled to the floor, gasping. Franklin, stop! Katie screamed, trying to get out of bed. You're going to hurt him. I whirled on her. Hurt him? Like you hurt me. Katie, do you have any idea what you've done? She shrank back, fear flickering in her eyes. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Too late for sorry, I spat. I know everything, Katie. The notebook, the other men, all of it. Her face went pale. What notebook? I smiled coldly. The one you kept hidden in your drawer. Detailed accounts of all your little adventures. Glenn, Norman, Dan, Kelvin, how many others were there? Katie, how long have you been making a fool of me? Sammy struggled to his feet, wiping blood from his split lip. You're bluffing. Katie wouldn't. Shut up, Katie hissed, her eyes never leaving mine. Franklin, please listen. I held up a hand, silencing her. Save it. I'm done listening to your lies. You want a divorce? Fine. But don't think for a second this is over. I'm going to make sure you both pay for what you've done. Sammy laughed, though it sounded forced. Big talk from a guy who just found out his wife's been cheating on him. What are you gonna do? Cry about it? I turned to him, my voice eerily calm. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Enjoy your time together while it lasts. Because I promise you, by the time I'm done, you'll both wish you'd never been born. With that, I turned and walked out of the room, ignoring Katie's pleas for me to come back. As I strode through the hospital corridors, my phone buzzed. It was Claire. Mr. Cervantes, I've got some preliminary information. Can we meet? I'll be at your office in 20 minutes, I replied. I sat across from Claire Black in her dimly lit office, my fingers drumming an impatient rhythm on the arm of my chair. She shuffled through a stack of papers, her brow furrowed in concentration. Well? I prompted, unable to contain myself any longer. What did you find? Claire looked up, her expression grave. Mr. Cervantes, I have to warn you. What I've uncovered, it's extensive, and it goes beyond just infidelity. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. Tell me everything. She nodded, spreading out several photographs on the desk between us. Let's start with the affairs. As you suspected, there were more than just the ones mentioned in your wife's notebook. I picked up the first photo. It showed Katie, dressed to the nines, entering a high-end hotel with a tall, distinguished-looking man. That's Glenn Phillips, Claire explained, CEO of a major tech company. They've been meeting regularly for about 6 months. She pointed to another photo. This one showed Katie in a passionate embrace with a younger man outside a seedy motel. Norman Everett. He's a personal trainer at her gym. Their affair seems to have started shortly after Glenn. My stomach churned as Claire laid out photo after photo, detailing Katie's various liaisons. Dan Hammond, a local politician. Kelvin Avery, a hotshot lawyer. And others, so many others. Jesus Christ, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. How did I not see this? Claire's voice was sympathetic but professional. She was very careful, Mr. Cervantes. But that's not all. Take a look at this. She handed me a stack of documents, bank statements, investment reports, emails. As I scanned them, my confusion grew. I don't understand. What am I looking at here? Claire leaned back in her chair, her expression grim. It appears that your wife's affairs weren't just about sex. She and her lovers have been involved in some questionable business dealings. Insider trading, mainly. They've been using information from Glenn's company to make illegal stock trades. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Are you saying Katie's not just a cheater, but a criminal too? Claire nodded. I'm afraid so. And there's more. It seems they all met during a camping trip about a year ago. Some kind of exclusive retreat for high-powered executives and their spouses. That's where this whole web started spinning. I stood up abruptly, pacing the small office. My mind was reeling, trying to process everything I just learned. So what do we do now? I asked, turning back to Claire. How do we prove all this? A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. I have a plan, if you're willing to go along with it. It's risky, and it'll require some creative methods. But if we pull it off, we can expose everything. I sat back down, leaning in close. I'm listening. Claire outlined her plan, and with each word, I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. It was bold, potentially dangerous, and exactly what I wanted. There's one more thing, Claire said as she finished explaining. I think we should hire some actors to help with the setup. People who can recreate some of the scenes from Katie's affairs based on the evidence we've gathered. I nodded slowly, a plan forming in my mind. I have a better idea. Why don't we invite them all to a charity gala? I'll anonymously offer them some lucrative business opportunity they won't be able to resist. Claire raised an eyebrow. That's actually brilliant. We can set up hidden cameras, capture their reactions when we expose them. And we'll live stream the whole thing, I added, a cruel smile spreading across my face. Let the whole world see what they've done. Claire studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. You're sure about this, Mr. Cervantes? Once we start down this road, there's no going back. I met her gaze, my resolve hardening. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. They took everything from me, Claire. Now I'm going to return the favor. She nodded, extending her hand. All right then, let's get to work. As I shook her hand, sealing our agreement, I felt a thrill of anticipation. Katie, Sammy, and all the rest thought they'd gotten away with it. They had no idea what was coming. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Claire and I worked tirelessly, piecing together every detail of our plan. We rented a luxurious event space, hired a team of actors, and set up an intricate system of hidden cameras and microphones. I sat in the control room, watching as the final preparations were made. Claire entered, her face flushed with excitement. Everything's ready, she reported. The invitations have been sent out, and we've got confirmations from all the targets. Katie, Sammy, Glenn, Norman, Dan, Kelvin. They'll all be here tonight. I nodded, a grim smile on my face. And the live stream? set up and ready to go. We've got over 10,000 people already waiting for it to start. I stood up, straightening my tie. Good. Let's go over the plan one more time. Claire nodded, pulling out a tablet. All right. The gala starts at 8 p.m. We'll let them mingle for about an hour, get them nice and relaxed. At 9, you'll take the stage to make your announcement about the big business opportunity. And that's when we start the show, I finished. The actors will begin their performances, recreating scenes from Katie's affairs based on the evidence we gathered. Exactly. We'll have cameras on all of them, capturing their reactions in real time. The live stream audience will see everything. I paced the small room, nervous energy coursing through me. What about the illegal activities? The insider trading? Claire's smile was predatory. Don't worry. I've made sure there are several financial investigators and law enforcement officials in attendance. They'll be very interested in what comes to light. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Daryl. Hey man, you okay? Haven't heard from you in weeks. Katie's been asking around, saying you've disappeared. What's going on? I stared at the message for a long moment before replying, I'm fine. Just needed some time. Listen, can you do me a favor? There's a charity gala tonight at the Grand Plaza Hotel. I need you to be there. Daryl's response came quickly, sure. But why? What's this about, Franklin? Just trust me, I texted back. You'll want to see this. And Daryl? Don't tell anyone I contacted you. I put my phone away, turning back to Claire. Is there anything else we need to do? She shook her head. We're as ready as we'll ever be. It's showtime, Mr. Cervantes. As we made our way to the main event space, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Months of anger, betrayal, and pain had led to this moment. Tonight, everything would change. The ballroom was already filling up when we arrived. I scanned the crowd, my heart rate quickening as I spotted familiar faces. There was Glenn, charming as ever in his expensive suit. Norman, looking out of place in his ill-fitting tuxedo. Dan and Kelvin, huddled together in deep conversation. And then I saw her, Katie. She was wearing a stunning red dress, her hair and makeup immaculate. For a moment, I felt a pang of what we'd once had. But then I saw Sammy approach her, his hand sliding possessively around her waist, and the feeling evaporated, replaced by cold fury. Claire nudged me. It's almost time. Are you ready? I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. Let's do this. As I made my way to the stage, I caught Daryl's eye across the room. He looked confused, concerned. I gave him a small nod before turning to face the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice ringing out across the suddenly quiet room. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know many of you are here because you were promised an exciting business opportunity. I paused, my eyes sweeping across the faces of Katie and her lovers. They were all watching me intently, greed and curiosity mingling in their expressions. Well, I'm afraid I haven't been entirely truthful with you. There is no business opportunity. At least, not the kind you were expecting. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. I saw Katie's brow furrow, a flicker of recognition and then fear crossing her face. Instead, I continued, my voice hardening. I'm here to make an announcement and to put on a show that I think you'll all find very illuminating. With that, I nodded to the back of the room. The lights dimmed, and a large screen lowered behind me. As the first images appeared, Katie entering a hotel with Glenn. I heard gasps and exclamations from the audience. What you're about to see, I said, my voice cutting through the growing chaos, is the truth. The truth about infidelity, about betrayal, about greed and corruption. As the images continued to flash across the screen, each one more damning than the last, I watched the faces of my targets. Katie had gone pale, her hand clutching Sammy's arm. Glenn was trying to edge towards the exit, only to find his path blocked by security. Norman looked like he might be sick. And then the actors began their performance. They moved through the crowd, recreating intimate moments and clandestine meetings with eerie accuracy. I saw Katie flinch as an actress whispered in her ear, repeating word for word something she'd said to Glenn in a moment she thought was private. The room was in uproar now. People were shouting, crying, trying to leave. But no one could escape the truth unfolding before their eyes. As the final act played out, a recreation of the day, Katie had ended up in the hospital. I locked eyes with her across the room. In that moment, I saw the realization dawn in her eyes. She knew that her world was crumbling, and that I was the one holding the sledgehammer. I turned back to the crowd, my voice rising above the chaos. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed tonight is just the beginning. The authorities have been notified about the illegal activities some of our guests have been involved in. And as for the rest, well, I think the court of public opinion will have plenty to say. With that, I stepped off the stage and made my way through the stunned crowd. As I passed Katie, I paused for just a moment. "I told you I'd make you pay," I said quietly. "This is just the start." Her response was lost in the commotion as police officers began to enter the room. I caught a glimpse of Claire, giving me a thumbs up from her position by the exit. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I took a deep breath. Phase 1 was complete, but the game was far from over. The aftermath of the charity gala was nothing short of explosive. As I sat in Claire's office the next morning, watching news reports flood in on multiple screens, I felt a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. Franklin Cervantes exposes web of infidelity and corruption, one headline blared. Another read, Tech CEO and politician arrested in insider trading scandal. Claire entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to me before settling into her chair with a weary sigh. "Well," she said, "I think it's safe to say we've stirred up quite the hornet's nest." I nodded, taking a sip of the bitter brew. "Any word on Katie and the others?" Claire pulled out her tablet, scrolling through her notes. "Katie's gone to ground. No one's seen her since she fled the gala last night. Sammy was picked up by the police this morning. Seems he had some outstanding warrants we didn't know about. And the rest? Glenn and Dan are in custody, facing multiple charges related to the insider trading. Norman and Kelvin are being questioned. It's a mess, Franklin. A beautiful, chaotic mess." I leaned back in my chair, a small smile playing at the corners of my mouth. Good. Let them scramble. Let them feel what it's like to have their world torn apart. Claire studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. "You know this isn't over, right? There's going to be backlash. People might start digging into your past, looking for skeletons in your closet." I met her gaze steadily. "Let them dig. I've got nothing to hide." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Daryl. "Franklin, what the hell, man? What was all that last night? Are you okay?" I sighed, knowing I owed my friend an explanation. "I'm fine, Daryl. Better than fine. Actually, can we meet for coffee? I'll explain everything." "Sure, man. The usual spot in an hour?" "See you there." I ended the call and turned to Claire. "I need to go. Keep me updated on any developments." She nodded. "Will do. And Franklin, be careful. You've made a lot of enemies in the past 24 hours. I left Claire's office and headed to the coffee shop where Daryl and I often met. As I walked, I could feel people's eyes on me. Some looked at me with curiosity, others with barely concealed hostility. The gala had been live-streamed. After all, my face was now recognizable to thousands. Daryl was already there when I arrived, 2 steaming cups on the table in front of him. His face was a mix of concern and confusion. "All right, Franklin," he said as I sat down. "Spill it. What the hell happened last night?" I took a deep breath and began to explain. I told him about Katie's affairs, the notebook, the hospital incident. As I spoke, Daryl's expression shifted from shock to anger to sympathy. "Jesus, man," he said when I finished. "Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped." I shook my head. "I needed to handle this on my own. Plus, I didn't want to put you in an awkward position at work." Daryl leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "So what now? That stunt you pulled last night, it's all over the news. People are calling you everything from a hero to a vengeful psychopath." I shrugged. "Let them talk. I did what I had to do." "And Katie? What about her?" For a moment, I felt a flicker of something. Regret? Pity? But I quickly pushed it aside. She made her bed. Now she can lie in it. Daryl studied me for a long moment. "You've changed, Franklin. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but Are you sure this is what you want? I met his gaze steadily. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Just then, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I pulled it out, my eyes widening as I read the headline. What is it? Daryl asked. I turned the phone so he could see. Katie's called a press conference. She's going to make a statement. Daryl whistled low. Well, this should be interesting. You gonna watch? I stood up, downing the last of my coffee. Better. I'm going to be there in person. As I left the coffee shop, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The game wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. I arrived at the hotel where Katie was holding her press conference just as the cameras were setting up. The room was buzzing with energy, reporters jostling for the best positions. I slipped in unnoticed, taking a spot at the back of the room. A hush fell over the crowd as Katie stepped up to the podium. She looked pale and drawn, a far cry from the confident woman I'd married. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Thank you all for coming, Katie began, her voice shaky. I know there have been a lot of shocking revelations in the past 24 hours. I'm here to address those and to... Her eyes scanned the room and locked with mine. I saw the moment of recognition, the flash of fear in her eyes. But to her credit, she recovered quickly. I'm here to take responsibility for my actions, she continued. What I did was wrong. I betrayed my husband, my friends, and my own principles. I got caught up in a world of excitement and greed, and I lost sight of what truly matters. A reporter called out, Mrs. Cervantes, what about the allegations of insider trading? Were you aware of the illegal activities? Katie hesitated, and I could see the internal struggle play out on her face. Finally, she said, I was aware that some of my associates were involved in questionable business practices. I chose to turn a blind eye. That was a mistake, and I'm prepared to face the consequences. Another reporter jumped in. And what about your husband? Do you have anything to say to Franklin Cervantes? At the sound of my name, all eyes in the room turned to me. I stood up straight, meeting Katie's gaze unflinchingly. She swallowed hard. Franklin, I'm sorry. What I did to you was unforgivable. I know that now. If I could take it all back, I couldn't help it. I laughed. The sound was harsh, cutting through the tense atmosphere of the room. Take it back? I said, my voice carrying easily in the suddenly silent room. You can't take back betrayal, Katie. You can't undo the lies, the deceit, the nights you spent in other men's beds while I worked to build a future for us. I started walking towards the podium, reporters parting to let me through. You say you're taking responsibility? That's rich. You're only here because you got caught. Because I exposed you for what you really are. Katie's face crumpled. Franklin, please. I know I hurt you, but this vendetta, it's destroying lives. Not just mine, but innocent people too. Our friends, our families. I reached the podium, standing just inches from her. Innocent? There are no innocents in this, Katie. Everyone involved made their choices. Now they get to live with the consequences. Turning to face the sea of cameras, I pulled out a USB drive. This contains detailed records of all the illegal activities Katie and her lovers were involved in. Bank statements, emails, recorded conversations. I'm turning it over to the authorities. The room erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed. Through it all, I kept my eyes on Katie. She looked broken, defeated. Good. You wanted excitement, Katie? I said, my voice low enough that only she could hear. Well, congratulations. You've got it. I hope it was worth it. As I turned to leave, a hand grabbed my arm. It was Sammy, his face twisted with rage. You bastard, he snarled. You think you can just waltz in here and ruin our lives? You're nothing but a jealous, pathetic little man. I smiled coldly. And you're nothing but a cheap Lothario who got in over his head. How does it feel, Sammy? Knowing that your little games have landed you in hot water with some very dangerous people? His eyes widened. What are you talking about? Oh, you didn't think I'd stop at just exposing the affairs, did you? I dug deep, Sammy. Found out about your gambling debts, your connections to some rather unsavory characters. I wonder how they'll react when they find out you can't pay up because you're facing jail time. The color drained from Sammy's face. You, you can't do this. I leaned in close. I already have. Enjoy prison, Sammy. I hear they love pretty boys like you in there. With that, I shook off his grip and walked out of the room, leaving chaos in my wake. As I stepped into the sunlight, I took a deep breath. Phase 2 was complete. Now for the final act. I pulled out my phone and dialed Claire. It's done, I said when she picked up. Time to move on to the next stage. How's the book coming along? Claire's voice was filled with excitement. It's practically writing itself, Franklin. With all this new material from the press conference, we'll have a bestseller on our hands. I smiled. Perfect. Make sure every sordid detail is in there. I want the world to know exactly what kind of people they were dealing with. Katie and her lovers had taken everything from me. Now, I was taking everything from them. Their reputations, their freedom, their futures. It was only fair. Let them call me vengeful. Let them say I'd gone too far. I didn't care. This was justice, served cold and without mercy. The weeks following the press conference were a whirlwind of activity. True to my word, I turned over all the evidence to the authorities. The arrest came swiftly after that. Glenn and Dan were the first to fall, taken into custody on charges of insider trading and financial fraud. Norman and Kelvin weren't far behind, implicated in a series of smaller but no less damaging crimes. Katie, to her credit, turned herself in. I watched on TV as she was led into the courthouse, head bowed, flanked by sturdy-faced lawyers. Part of me had expected to feel something at the sight, regret, perhaps, or even a twinge of sympathy. But all I felt was a cold satisfaction. I was at Claire's office when the news broke about Sammy. He tried to run, apparently. Made it as far as the Mexican border before they caught up with him. The reporters seemed to take particular glee in describing his botched escape attempt. Well, Claire said, turning off the TV. I'd say that wraps things up nicely, wouldn't you? I nodded. Almost. There's still the matter of the divorce. Claire raised an eyebrow. You're going through with it then? Even after all this? Especially after all this, I replied. I want a clean break. No ties, no loose ends. She studied me for a moment, then shrugged. All right, I'll put you in touch with a good divorce lawyer. With all the evidence we have, it should be a pretty straightforward case. Just then, my phone rang. It was Daryl. Hey man, he said when I picked up. You see the news about Sammy? Yeah, just now. Idiot never could think more than 2 steps ahead. Daryl was quiet for a moment. Listen, Franklin, I know you've been through hell, but don't you think this has gone far enough? I mean, they're all facing jail time. Their lives are ruined. Maybe it's time to let it go. I felt a flare of anger. Let it go? After what they did to me? No, Daryl. This isn't over until I say it's over. I get that, I do. But man, you've changed. The Franklin I knew wouldn't have taken things this far. The Franklin you knew died the day he found out his wife was fucking half the town behind his back, I snapped. This is who I am now. Deal with it or don't, but don't try to make me feel guilty for giving them exactly what they deserve. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Daryl sighed. All right, man. I just hope you know what you're doing. After I hung up, Claire gave me a concerned look. Everything okay? I waved her off. Fine. Daryl's just having trouble understanding why I can't just forgive and forget. She nodded slowly. And what about you, Franklin? Are you okay? I met her gaze steadily. I'm better than okay. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm in control of my life. No more lies, no more deception. Just the truth, laid bare for everyone to see. Claire smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Well, in that case, let's talk about the book. The publisher's chomping at the bit. They want to fast-track it for release next month. I leaned forward, all business now. Good. I want it to hit while the story's still fresh in people's minds. Have they settled on a title yet? They're leaning towards Betrayal's Web, the Franklin Cervantes story. What do you think? I considered it for a moment, then nodded. It'll do. Make sure they use that photo we talked about for the cover. The one from our wedding day. Claire raised an eyebrow. You sure? It's a bit on the nose, don't you think? I smiled coldly. That's the point. I want everyone who picks up that book to see what Katie threw away. What they all threw away. As I left Claire's office that day, I felt a sense of anticipation building. The book would be the final nail in the coffin, the last act in my grand plan of revenge. Soon, the whole world would know every sordid detail of Katie's betrayal and her lover's crimes. Let them try to rebuild their lives after that. Let them try to find redemption in the face of such public humiliation. I'd taken everything from them, just as they'd taken everything from me. An eye for an eye, a life for a life. And I regretted nothing. The day my divorce was finalized, I decided to treat myself. I walked out of the courthouse, ignoring the flashes of cameras and shouted questions from reporters, and headed straight to the nearest animal shelter. I'm looking for a dog, I told the volunteer at the front desk. Something big. Loyal. She smiled, clearly not recognizing me. Well, we've got plenty of those. Any particular breed in mind? I shook my head. Just show me what you've got. As we walked through the kennels, a cacophony of barks filling the air, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Katie or her lovers or my grand plan of revenge. I was just here, present. We stopped in front of a large cage. Inside was a massive German shepherd, its amber eyes watching me intently. This is Max, the volunteer said. He's been here a while. Former police dog. Great with people he trusts, but he can be a bit intense. I crouched down, meeting Max's gaze. Hey, buddy, what do you say? Want to get out of here? Max tilted his head, considering me. Then, slowly, he padded over to the cage door and sat down. I stood up. I'll take him. An hour later, Max and I were walking through the park near my new apartment. I'd moved out of the house Katie and I had shared, unable to stand the memories that clung to every corner. As we walked, my phone buzzed. It was Claire. Franklin, great news. The book just hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. I felt a smile spread across my face. That's fantastic, Claire. How are the reviews? Mixed, to be honest. Some are calling it a brave expose of corruption and infidelity. Others are saying it's nothing but a vengeful screed. I chuckled. Let them say what they want. The truth is out there now. That's all that matters. We chatted for a few more minutes about sales figures and potential TV appearances before hanging up. As I pocketed my phone, I noticed Max watching me intently. What do you think, boy? I asked, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. Did I do the right thing? Max just leaned into my touch, his tail wagging slightly. We continued our walk, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the path. As we rounded a corner, I saw a familiar figure approaching. It was Daryl. Franklin, he called out, looking surprised. I didn't expect to see you here. I tensed slightly, remembering our last conversation, but Max seemed relaxed, so I forced myself to stay calm. Hey, Daryl. Just taking my new friend for a walk. This is Max. Daryl crouched down, offering his hand for Max to sniff. He's beautiful. When did you get him? Today, actually. Felt like I needed a change. Daryl straightened up, his expression serious. Listen, Franklin. About our last conversation, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have judged you. What you went through, I can't even imagine. I studied him for a moment, then nodded. It's okay. I know it's been hard to understand. Hell, sometimes I don't understand it myself. So what now? Daryl asked. The book's out. The trials are starting. Is it over? I looked down at Max, who was sitting patiently at my feet, then back at Daryl. Yeah, I said slowly. Yeah, I think it is. We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of the past few months hanging between us. Finally, Daryl cleared his throat. You want to grab a beer? Catch up properly? I hesitated, then smiled. Sure, but let's make it coffee instead. I've got to get this guy home first. As we walked towards the park exit, Daryl filling me in on office gossip I'd missed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Peace. The storm had passed. The revenge I'd sought had been exacted. Katie and her lovers were facing the consequences of their actions. As we walked, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. So, Daryl said, breaking into my thoughts. What's next for Franklin Cervantes? You going back to work? I shook my head. No, I don't think so. The book's doing well, and I've got some speaking engagements lined up. I'm thinking of starting a foundation, actually. Something to help people who've been betrayed, give them the resources to fight back. Daryl whistled low. That's actually pretty amazing, Franklin. You're taking all this pain and turning it into something positive. Don't get me wrong, I said, my voice hardening slightly. I'm not forgiving Katie or any of them. What they did was unforgivable. But if I can use my experience to help others, maybe some good can come out of all this mess. We reached the coffee shop and grabbed a table outside. Max settled at my feet, alert but relaxed. As we sipped our drinks, Daryl filled me in on the latest developments. Katie's trial starts next week, he said. The prosecution's case is rock solid thanks to all the evidence you provided. They're saying she could get up to 15 years. I nodded. And the others? Glenn and Dan have already been convicted. They're looking at 20 years minimum. Norman and Kelvin took plea deals. They'll do 5 to 7 years each. Sammy, well, he's got a whole host of charges. Drug trafficking, assault, you name it. He'll be lucky if he ever sees the outside of a prison again. Good. They made their choices. Now they can live with the consequences. Daryl studied me for a moment. You really don't regret any of it, do you? Exposing them. The book. All of it? I met his gaze steadily. Not for a second. They took everything from me, Daryl. My trust, my future, my peace of mind. I just returned the favor. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Claire. Check your email. You've got an offer for a movie deal based on the book. They want you as a consultant. I showed the message to Daryl, who let out a low whistle. Damn, Franklin. You're going Hollywood. I chuckled, shaking my head. I don't know about that, but it might be an opportunity to reach even more people with my story. As we finished our coffee and said our goodbyes, I felt a sense of anticipation building. Not the feverish, angry energy that had driven me for months, but something calmer, more purposeful. I looked down at Max, who gazed up at me with unwavering loyalty. What do you say, boy? Ready for a new adventure? Max's tail wagged in response, and I couldn't help but smile. As we walked home, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt truly at peace for the first time in ages. The old Franklin was gone, destroyed by betrayal and lies. But from those ashes, a new man had emerged. Stronger, wiser, unforgiving, perhaps, but no longer consumed by rage. Katie and her lovers had tried to break me. Instead, they'd forged me into something they could never have anticipated. Their actions had set me on a new path, one that would allow me to help others and build a life on my own terms. As I unlocked the door to my apartment, I glanced back at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Katie was preparing for her trial. Sammy was sitting in a jail cell. The others were facing their own reckonings. But me? I was free. Free from their lies, their manipulation, their betrayal. Free to write my own story, on my own terms. And I wouldn't have it any other way. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.